Hi, my name is Caitlin Guerra, and this is a presentation on thesis work I undertook during my time at University College Dublin while I was completing my Master's in Environmental Policy. This is titled Identifying Salient Issues in the Assessment of Solar Energy Developments in Ireland. This research was done between May and August of 2018. To start, a quick outline of this presentation. I'll begin with an introduction on the thesis, along with an outline of Irish planning system, the method I undertook for my research, discussion of results, and then recommendations and a conclusion. Now, I'm not going to go into all the detailed renewable energy policy because there's a lot out there and it would take way too long. So I will say in 2018, the European Union set directives that their member states were all subject to concerning RE, renewable energy sources. Because of this, Ireland adopts a National Renewable Energy Action Plan in 2010. Now, this action plan set a binding target of 16% energy consumption from RE by 2020 and a non-legally binding target of 40%. And their RE policy is primarily focused on wind and biomass. However, there's been a recent increase in solar planning applications. When it comes to wind, though, there's been a lot of past controversy for their wind energy development in Ireland. And considering this and the increase in solar planning applications and the lack of policy for solar planning applications, there's a risk that they could repeat the mistakes that was made during their wind energy. Other research has also shown that solar energy has been highly contentious. There has been research that's shown that opposition concerning visual impacts on scenic areas, perceived impacts from solar farm development on tourism, property prices, and agricultural production. There's also been technical issues such as glint and glare, and even land use concerning local ecology. Considering all of this, I decided to look at what issues were most salient in assessing solar energy development in Ireland. And so with my thesis statement, this research highlights and discusses salient issues emerging in the assessment of solar energy development, or SED going forward, at local and national levels in Ireland as a means to identify and profile some important knowledge gaps for researchers and practitioners to address in formulation of policy for decision making. To begin, an outline of the Irish planning system. Now, the Irish planning system was established on a blueprint provided by the British system. And in contrast to the systems of North American and many other continental European countries, the Irish planning system operates on a discretionary basis. So the objectives of the local development plans are not legally binding. However, planning applications are still lodged and assessed by local planning authorities, which in the case of Ireland is their counties. Some unique aspects of the Irish planning system. They have an independent planning appeals board called An Bord Pleanála, and they have rights of third parties to appeal a decision made by local planning authorities. So, in essence, with some stipulations, it means that anybody anywhere can appeal the decision of a local planning authority with respect to a planning application. So, therefore, examining discrepancies in planning decisions between the local authorities and the appeal board might help provide some early insight into potential issues emerging in this policy space. Now, when it came to my selection of cases for this study, I decided to look at planning reports and decisions that were made by the local authority and the board inspectors. Now, it is important to look at both the reports and the decisions, as some of the final decisions to grant or refuse permission were altered. And it helps to identify if and why a final decision from the local authorities or the board may have differed from the recommendations made. I also narrowed down my criteria for the cases that I consulted. 1. Only cases appealed to the board were examined. And this was necessary as it helped identify any differences in the assessment of cases between the local and national levels of the planning governance. 2. Only cases of SED proposals that were adjudicated by the board between January 2016 to April 2018 were inspected. This time frame was chosen as 2016 was the earliest year when an influx of SCD cases were evaluated in Ireland, as seen here. And number 3, only cases that generated a maximum energy capacity between 0 to 20 megawatts was inspected. This was chosen as, at the time, there were currently no large-scale solar farms in Ireland. One thing to note is that while this includes many small to medium-sized SADs, it does exclude rooftop solar panels. That was because they would present a different set of issues in terms of utility development, so it just would have made it a little more confusing in this case. Overall, 194 documents were collated and analyzed. To do this analyzation, I utilized the SPEED framework, which is the Social Political Evaluation of Energy Development, developed by Stevens, Wilson, and Peterson in a 2008 study. This framework supplies a broad set of issues that are relevant to the assessment of energy technology proposals, and utilizes a bunch of potential factors in the determination of a proposal, such as economic, social, political, and cultural. SPEED framework, it's theoretically grounded in several integrated interdisciplinary threads, which help identify and evaluate factors influencing energy policy formation, energy technology deployment, and ultimately, the most important here, issues of salience and assessment of development proposals. Now, no research was identified in the use of SPEED framework for SDD planning, but it has been used in a number of studies concerning wind energy development, specifically examining policymaker and developer perspectives on these proposals. Now, the SPEED framework utilizes a codebook, as seen here. This codebook, majority of it was deductively developed from the previously mentioned wind-related research using the SPEED framework. However, an additional 2 coding themes were inductively developed from the analysis of the collated material: infrastructure and public. During the coding process, these 2 new themes were added to the codebook and the material was re-examined. So, 4 types of reports were coded using NVivo Pro 11. All the reports are open source data and sourced from the board's website and relevant local planning authority web pages. Phrases and sentences were the unit of analysis used, and all the reports were analyzed both quantitatively by counting number of codes for each theme and qualitatively by examining content of each item coded. Now, there were some limitations that were acknowledged during this research, specifically the ability to conduct interviews with the local authority planners and board inspectors would have really helped elucidate reports and decisions. However, board inspectors and members are forbidden from discussing their work on appeal cases with members of the public. So unfortunately, these interviews never took place. Now to the good stuff, the coding results. So as we can see here, the aesthetics and cultural were the highest theme recorded, with a whopping 1,417 references found. I will be looking at all these themes though, and the results that I found. So, aesthetics and cultural. Primarily, visual amenity, landscape, archaeology, and built-in natural heritage were found. Visual amenity and landscape were the most frequently mentioned, and overall the highest reason given for refusals by both the board and local authorities. Archaeology and cultural heritage was also mentioned frequently, however it was primarily concerned with conditions on a granting of planning permission. Next we had environment and wildlife. References to this theme primarily concerned environmental impact assessment, appropriate assessment, mature 2000 sites, and other environmentally designated sites, specifically around the assessments that had previously taken place during the planning process. However, this was ranked 3rd after aesthetics and cultural and health and safety for refusals. Next came health and safety. Primarily, this theme focused on road safety, specifically construction period, and the local traffic. Most of the concerns were that increases of construction traffic would adversely impact local traffic circulation. also frequently referenced in this theme was glint and glare. Now, glint and glare is not a unique issue to solar panels, and it also just refers to shine caused by any reflective surfaces. It's primarily found in planning applications in relation to windows and steel. What is interesting is that self-inspectors' reports noted that appeals of SED proposals heavily mentioned glint and glare, more so than any other type of planning appeals. This coding was also found in the aesthetics and cultural theme when referencing visual amenities, specifically on landscape and sightline impacts. Next, we have the economic theme. This is in relation to bonds, insurance, or mandated financial development contributions. And in the bulk of the material, it was found in respect to financial obligations for the developers. Employment is also under this theme, but only one inspector's report mentioned SED supporting and creating job opportunities. This theme was never found to be a variable for refusal. However, it was noted in granting permission for a proposal and SED being economically beneficial for the area. Next, we have the political theme. This one was pretty interesting. Much of the theme and the coding detailed the lack of policy for solar energy in Ireland. In fact, currently Ireland does not have policies or guidance specifically for solar energy. Instead, the reports prepared by the board relied on the UK guidelines for assistance in assessing the SED proposals. And in some instances, this lack of national policy was noted as a detriment to potential SED proposals and then used as justification for refusing permission. For example, in 2 inspectors' reports in cases in County Wexford, it was inferred that a continued lack of spatial or strategic policy concerning SEDs would create issues with competing interests for land use. The next theme is technical. This refers to solar panels, grid connections, megawatts, and transmission. And generally it was found to be attached to current conditions for granting permission, primarily around grid connection issues and how the solar panels should be installed. Only once was it listed as a reason for refusing permission, and it was primarily related to the grid connection issues. Next we have infrastructure, one of the new themes that emerged from this research. Now, infrastructure refers to the existing roads and the buildings within the solar development sites. This does not relate to the technical themes such as solar panels or grid connections. It also is not considering the safety measures and issues found in health and safety. However, a number of local authority planners did mention infrastructure as a reason for refusal, but no mentions were made from any of the board inspectors. Now last we have the public theme. Now this theme was the least coded with only 13 instances. And while there were so few instances of this coding, I still felt it was important to develop it. Specifically because it reflects a potentially important but ultimately poorly represented issue in the assessment of SED proposals. This code was used to capture where appeals were submitted to the board on the basis that public consultations processes undertaken by the developer were insufficient. However, in all the instances, the inspectors concluded that adequate consultation took place, and it was never given as a reason for refusal in any board determination. Now, while there was a lot of similarities in the results between the board and the local authority reports, there were some differences. First, in the amount that was coded in each theme. So under the local authority, they primarily mentioned aesthetics and cultural, health and safety, and then environment and wildlife. For the board, it was aesthetics and cultural, environment and wildlife, and then health and safety. The most interesting differences, though, came during the final decisions for refusal. So as we see in this chart, we have the themes referenced as reasons for refusal of an SED proposal by report type. At the top here, we have the theme. On the side, we have the data source, which starts with the inspector's report by the board order, which is their final decision, the local authority planner's report, and then the local authorities council's decision. Now, When we look at the council decision, we have aesthetics and cultural with 11 references, health and safety with 9, environment and wildlife with 4. When we look at the board, aesthetics and cultural, environment and wildlife, and political theme all are tied with 3 references for refusal. Then, economic, health and safety, and infrastructure all have 1 reference. Another thing to note is that the inspector's report has 10 proposals in there, whereas the board order only has 6. This is interesting because that means that while the inspector's report may have recommended refusal, the board order decided to then grant these proposals permission instead. The other difference is that the board inspectors appeared to prioritize the political theme much more than local authority, as we saw in that chart. The focus was largely on the lack of national policy and guidance for SED in Ireland, and it's believed that this emphasis is possibly due to the status of the board as Ireland's National Appeals Office, and could reflect their frustration at the national policy vacuum on the matter of SED planning. With these results, I developed a few recommendations. The first, formulation and implementation of national policy on SED. So, research has shown that Ireland has previously experienced significant public opposition to wind energy development. And this research suggests that this opposition is mostly due to the inadequate policy framework for wind energy development. Now, a bottom-up approach has been acknowledged as critical to the success of wind farms, but research has also demonstrated that this must be conducted within the context of a national policy framework to help guide the decision-making process. So, when it comes to future work in Ireland, it's notable that this salient issue within board reports examined in this study was the insufficient policy assisting the assessment of SED proposals in Ireland. This lack of policy guidance has created inconsistencies in the decisions from board and local authorities, and may result in uncertainty for investors and ultimately hinder transition to a low-carbon energy system. In fact, the risk of this may already be witnessed as we see that there's hesitation by the local authorities to grant permission for SEDs in their area. Therefore, there's a pressing need for Ireland to formulate and implement national policy that specifies the assessment criteria for decision-making in regard to SEDs. The second recommendation is a production of visual impact and landscape criteria for SED. Now, in 2015, Ireland's Department of Arts, Heritage and Gaeltacht published a national landscape strategy for Ireland. Within this strategy, it requires local authorities to formulate and implement policies and guidance to preserve natural and built visual amenities in their area. However, it's clear in the study that very few authorities have criteria in their local development plans concerning visual impact and landscape. This is necessary, and it should be developed. It should include methods on how to define zones of visual influence, furnish detailed landscape designations, and supply a systemic approach for the assessment of issues concerning wind and glare. This is vital, as we saw that aesthetics and cultural was the #1 reason for refusal. The last recommendation is the inclusion of SED policies in local development plans. Now, I really like this quote from a study done in 2004 by Grist, which is that local development plans have been noted as the basic policy document of the planning authority, in which the planning objectives for the area are set out. Now, local authorities are charged with the initial assessment of most SED proposals in Ireland. So they should be informed by national guidance, and they should include location and assessment criteria and be as specific as possible. So in conclusion, little research has been done on solar energy in Ireland that focuses on prominence of assessment issues in the planning process. And this is a pressing matter because we're seeing a rapid increase of SED planning applications, but still a persistence in policy vacuum in the guiding of how to assess these. So this study provides a first of its kind overview of issue salience and decision making in an Irish context, and provides a platform for future quantitative and qualitative research. Now, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and thanks.